Tonight, we travel to the quiet countryside of southern England. Among green fields, winding rivers, and ancient stone buildings, lies a city whose story stretches back nearly 1,000 years. A city known for its towers, libraries, and courtyards. A place where history seems to linger in every street and every archway. This is Oxford. Today, Oxford is famous around the world as the home of one of the oldest universities in existence. Students from across the globe travel here to study among buildings that have stood for centuries. But long before Oxford became a city of scholars, it was something far simpler. It was a crossing, a place where travelers moved their cattle across a shallow river, a small settlement that grew quietly beside the water. A place shaped by trade, conflict, and the slow passage of time. Over the centuries, Oxford would grow from a modest riverside town into one of the most historic cities in England. Tonight, we explore the quiet rise of Oxford, a journey through rivers, castles, scholars, and the calm streets of one of England's most remarkable cities. To understand Oxford, we must first look at its geography. The city sits where two rivers meet. The River Thames flows gently through the region, joined by the smaller River Cherwell. In early medieval England, rivers were essential for travel and trade. Roads were often poor or dangerous, but rivers offered natural pathways through the landscape. At a certain point along the Thames, the water became shallow enough for animals to cross. Farmers and travellers began bringing their oxen across this part of the river, guiding them through the slow-moving water. This crossing became known as Oxen a Forda, meaning the ford of the oxen. Over time, the name slowly changed. Oxen a Forda became Oxford. What began as a simple river crossing gradually developed into a small settlement. Travelers passing through the region needed places to rest, trade goods, and repair equipment. Wooden houses appeared along the riverbanks. Farmers worked the nearby fields. Small markets formed where goods could be exchanged. The settlement remained quiet and modest for many years, but its location ensured that it would continue to grow. By the 10th century, Oxford had become a small but established town. England during this time was a land of shifting kingdoms and growing settlements. The Saxons had built towns across the countryside, many protected by walls or wooden defences. Oxford became one of these fortified towns. Because of its location between important regions of England, the town slowly gained strategic importance. Roads connecting different parts of the country passed through the area. Merchants began stopping there to trade food, cloth, tools, and livestock. But Oxford also found itself caught in the conflicts of the age. During the Viking invasions of England, many towns were attacked or occupied by Scandinavian forces. Oxford itself was occasionally drawn into these struggles between Saxons and Vikings, as control of England shifted back and forth. Despite these conflicts, the town survived and continued to grow. By the time England entered the late 11th century, Oxford had become a recognisable town within the kingdom. But a dramatic change was about to reshape the country. In the year 1066, England was conquered by William of Normandy in an event known as the Norman Conquest. The new Norman rulers began building castles across England to secure their control over important towns and cities. Oxford was no exception. The Normans constructed a large fortress known as Oxford Castle. The castle stood as both a defensive structure and a symbol of Norman authority. From its towers, soldiers could watch over the surrounding countryside and the growing town below. The presence of the castle helped stabilize the region. Merchants felt safer traveling through Oxford. Trade increased, and the town slowly expanded beyond its early boundaries. Stone buildings began to replace wooden ones. Churches were constructed, and the streets became busier with travelers and traders. Oxford was still far from being a major city, but it was steadily becoming an important place within medieval England. Yet the most significant transformation in Oxford's history would arrive from an unexpected source: scholars. During the late 11th and early 12th centuries, scholars began gathering in Oxford to teach and study. Education during the medieval period was closely tied to the church. Monasteries and religious institutions were centres of learning, where texts were copied and knowledge was preserved. Oxford gradually became a meeting place for teachers and students interested in theology, philosophy, and classical learning. Over time, these gatherings of scholars developed into a structured academic community. This community eventually became what we now know as the University of Oxford. Students attended lectures given by masters who explained ancient texts and debated philosophical ideas. Lessons were often conducted in Latin, the language of scholars across Europe. At first, there were no formal colleges or buildings dedicated to the university. Students rented rooms in houses across the town, while teachers gave lectures wherever space could be found. But as the number of scholars increased, the need for organization grew. During the 13th century, Oxford began building the institution that would define its academic life. The first colleges were founded to provide housing, discipline, and structure for students. Among the earliest were colleges such as Merton College and Balliol College. These colleges were more than simple residences. They became communities of scholars where students lived, studied, and ate together. Each college had its own traditions, rules, and leadership. Stone buildings replaced earlier wooden structures, and courtyards appeared where students could gather between lectures. Libraries slowly filled with manuscripts copied by hand. Oxford was transforming into a true university town. Life in medieval Oxford was not always peaceful. The growing population of students sometimes created tension with the local residents of the town. Students were often young and far from home, and conflicts between scholars and townspeople occasionally broke out. These disputes became known as conflicts between town and gown. At times, arguments in taverns or markets escalated into larger clashes in the streets. Despite these tensions, the university continued to grow. The reputation of Oxford spread across Europe, attracting scholars from distant regions. The town itself benefited from the presence of students who brought money and trade to local businesses. Oxford was becoming both a place of learning and a thriving medieval town. Centuries later, Oxford would briefly become the political centre of England. During the 17th century, the country was divided by a conflict known as the English Civil War. King Charles I and Parliament fought for control of the kingdom. During this war, the king chose Oxford as his headquarters. For several years, the city served as the royal capital, while the king's forces battled Parliament across England. The quiet university town suddenly became a centre of military and political activity. Soldiers filled the streets, and the city's buildings were used to support the royal court. Eventually, however, the war ended in defeat for the king. Oxford returned to its quieter academic life, but the episode remains one of the most dramatic moments in the city's history. Today, Oxford remains one of the most famous university cities in the world. Its skyline is marked by towers, spires, and domes rising above centuries-old streets. Libraries like the Bodleian Library still hold vast collections of knowledge gathered over generations. Students walk through courtyards that have witnessed centuries of learning and debate. But Oxford is more than just a university. It is a city shaped by rivers, trade, conquest, and history. From a simple river crossing, where farmers led their oxen through shallow waters, Oxford grew into one of the most historic cities in England. And though the modern world has changed much around it, the quiet past of Oxford can still be felt in its ancient streets and peaceful gardens. Cities often grow slowly, shaped by geography, chance, and the people who pass through them. Oxford began with a simple crossing in a river. Over centuries, it became a town, then a centre of learning, and finally, one of the most famous academic cities in the world. Its story reminds us that even the greatest institutions often begin in the most ordinary places. And in Oxford, the echoes of that long journey remain quietly present. In the rivers that still flow beside the city, in the ancient stones of its colleges, and in the calm rhythm of a place where history and learning continue side by side.